Hardcore Superstar is a rock band that's been around for quite some time, since the late 90s, I believe. And while they haven't achieved much fame here in the US, they have been very consistent about releasing albums. They're a very basic rock band, and if you haven't heard them before, think of a heavier version of Buck Cherry without the made for radio panty dropper ballads. They do a few ballads, but they're not obvious made for radio songs, or I don't know what I'm saying there. Their song structures are very much designed for radio, and it's actually really surprising the US hasn't picked them up more. 3 to 4 minute type songs, verse, chorus. You might get a 30-second solo or something like that. But they're very basic songs. Now, before I get into this album review, just a few thoughts on the band discography prior to this album, just to kind of give an idea of where I'm coming from when I rate this album. Their self-titled album, Dreaming in the Casket, Beg for It, and Split Your Lip are the first four albums that I checked out by this band. And I really, really liked those albums. I liked that style a lot. I got them all at the same time, and they were on regular play on my iPod for about 2 months. Very solid albums. I really like that style, and I really like that change once they started with the self-titled album. I then went back and looked at their work before the self-titled album, and I have to admit I didn't care for it, except for the song Hello Goodbye, which was kind of cool. The rest of it, I don't know, had this kind of late 90s alternative rock mixed with some sort of 70s rock vibe that I just didn't care for. Fortunately, I thought the four albums I liked were their most recent albums at the time. So in 2013, I expected another album as good as those four, and unfortunately, Come On Take On Me ended up being an album which felt very rushed. It felt like they came up with a bunch of good choruses and then just kind of slapped something together and didn't really flesh out the songs a little more. So I was a bit disappointed in that album. So in 2015, we are treated to their next album, simply entitled HCSS, initials for Hardcore Superstar. Because they already did a self-titled album, apparently didn't want to do another one, and apparently lacked creativity in titling their album. So we get HCSS, whatever, I guess. Now, on this album, I was really hoping that they would get back to what they did on the four albums that I like, writing, kick-ass, edgy hard rock album with great songwriting, complete songs, and all that. Unfortunately, that's not what we got here. The first thing I noticed in the very first song was that while it was definitely heavier than their first couple of albums, it definitely had this feel of those really, really early albums. And that's littered throughout this album. I don't know why they felt the need to go back and pull influences from those days, but they did, and I really, really think that hurts this album a lot. Now, fans of those albums might be perfectly fine with this, but for me, like I said before, it's not my style, it's not my cup of tea, it's not what I like, and I really don't want to throw down my money for something that I don't care for. The second big problem, and I find this one to be just as big of an issue as the style, is the songwriting. It really took a step back on this one. You've got some songs with repetitive chorus, Ocean being one I can think of right now, as well as just some of the worst music I've heard this band do, at the very least since those early albums, if not of all time. There's one song which I'll get into when I do the track-by-track listing that I had to force myself to get through the first chorus just so I could talk about it for this review. I don't remember any of the songs on those early albums being that bad that I couldn't at least get through the song once. Now, when I think of Hardcore Superstar, I think of some good, straightforward, kind of modern-sounding hard rock. And unfortunately, on this album, there's not enough of that. They experiment quite a bit, and I guess as fans, we have to allow a band to have some creativity and try some different things. But at the same time, the band, I think, also has enough of a responsibility to the fans to give them enough of what they want. And there is not enough straightforward hard rock on this album. And even with the few songs that they do have like that, a couple of those aren't really written very well. So all in all, this album just really isn't that good, and I really feel like I wasted my money on it. And rather than rant and rave and anything like that, let's just go ahead and get to my track-by-track review. The album opens with "Don't Mean Shit," and I worried from the moment I heard the song. It is kind of a hard rocker. It's a fast paced song, but it kind of had more of the sound of some of the harder rocking songs on those early albums I mentioned before. Still, it's a pretty good song. It's actually one of the better songs on this album. It's got some good melodies and whatnot. It's kind of cool once I get past the fact that it's not "Beg for It" or "Split Your Lip." It's actually a pretty good song. "Party Till I'm Gone" is the next track, and it's kind of reminiscent of some of the albums I like. It's a little bit more of a hard rocking song with a little bit more of a basic hard rock style to it. It's got some good melodies and such. It's really hard to describe a lot of hardcore superstar songs because they do kind of have the AC/DC thing where they're just going to give you the song. They're not really going to give you a lot of flash or extra stuff, but it's definitely one I enjoy. "The Cemetery" is next. This one's okay. It's got some decent melodies to it, and yeah, it's an alright song. Now, where we kind of get into songs that I don't like, we get into the next track, "Off With Their Heads," which is a faster paced song. It's softer from what I remember. I remember a lot of drums and bass, probably some clean guitars in there somewhere. I've only listened to this album twice, so bear with me. But I remember the chorus being really repetitive, and honestly, I just really didn't care for the song much. It's not the worst thing in the world. I could listen to it without skipping it if I had to, but it's not really that good either. "Fly" is next, and this song reminds me of something, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Now, the song itself isn't that great, but it's okay. But the problem is that it's over 7 minutes, almost 8 minutes actually. And for as good or okay as the song is, it really should have been more like 3 or 4. It's definitely a softer song. It reminds me of something classic rock, but I can't quite put my finger on if it's Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, something along those lines, which is kind of interesting to describe a hardcore superstar song. As I just mentioned, they typically go the AC/DC route of they've got a style and stick with it. But they definitely do branch out in this song, and I can appreciate that. It has kind of a cool vibe to it. The chorus doesn't really have a whole lot of a punch to it. It's not bad if the rest of the song were a little bit stronger, or well, more importantly, if the song were shorter. But I don't know. This song, I'll probably give it some more chances, but it's one I could probably listen to, but not a favorite by any means. "The Ocean" is next, and finally we get a song that really kind of harkens back to the albums that I like. Unfortunately, the chorus is just "the ocean" repeated pretty much over and over and over again. Maybe another word in there about the ocean. I can't remember. Like I said, I only listened to this album twice. It's definitely too repetitive. The verses are awesome. I like the guitar riff in the beginning once the song kind of kicks in. I don't know. I'll give it a shot. See if the chorus bugs me less. But I don't know. It's okay for people that don't mind a repetitive chorus. Hey, finally get a nice little rocker in there. Now the next song, "Touch the Sky." This is hands down my least favorite song on the album, and this album probably loses at least 20 points in my review. Okay, that's exaggerating things. Not by much, though. This album definitely loses a lot of points because of this song. This is one of the worst songs I've ever heard them do. It's, I guess, not. No, it's not the worst song I've ever heard, but I really don't like this song. The vibe of it, it sounds so poppy, and I don't like. From the moment I heard this weird poppy fake beat that starts the song out, I knew I wasn't gonna like it. And I guess the muffled guitars and the weird, almost has like a clapping sound, but I don't know what it is. I assume it's some sort of synthesizer or some form of percussion or something going on in there. It just oozed cheesy pop, and that's pretty much what the song is. It's got a silly guitar lick that plays once the guitars kick in, and the vocals during the verses are really nonsensical, unless he's speaking in another language, which is possible, in which case, forget I said any of that part. But even if he's speaking another language in that part, I don't care for the melody. The chorus is actually the best part of the song. It's not terrible. It could be heavier. I only suffered through getting to the chorus one time just so I could comment on the song on this review. Won't be listening to it again. It's definitely not enough to make me want to go back to the song. The verses are just awful. Like I said, cheesy pop music and with nonsensical lyrics. Again, unless it's in another language, in which case I apologize. Horrible song. Don't care for it at all. And the album will be far better from here on out. Fortunately, this song is followed by the song Growing Old, which is hands down my favorite song on the album. Now, unfortunately, I have a complaint about this one too. Fortunately, it's all in an intro, which lasts not an hour, but a minute and a half, and it's kind of annoying. Doesn't really serve a purpose. If you can ignore it, fine. If not, if you're throwing it in your iTunes to put on your iPod, you can set the start time and skip all that crap, which is what I will be doing. But the song itself is actually pretty cool. It's well put together. It's more of a hard rock song. It's got nice melodies. It definitely goes back to the albums that I like by this band. And really, the rest of the album kind of does that, but this was the best put together song of the last three. Glue is next, and I think I remember reading the Wikipedia that this is a single, and I don't really get why. It's like I said, it's got kind of that hard rock style I like, but to be honest, I don't really know that it had a chorus, or if it wasn't very memorable. It's okay. I'll probably give it another listen, but overall, I could do without it. Messed Up for Sure ends the album, and it's kind of good to end the album, or any album for that matter, with one of the better songs, and this one definitely does that. This is possibly my second favorite song on the album. It definitely has that attitude from the albums that I like by this band. I feel like the chorus needs a little more punch. Like, I think the lyrics or even the melodies are okay enough. I just think the singer needs to deliver it with a little more attitude. But overall, it's still an enjoyable track that I almost said enjoyable track that I enjoy. God damn. Anyways, so overall, this album just was pretty much a disappointment to me. It's not a horrible album, I guess, but I don't know. If you like the first few albums by the band, then you'll probably like this. But if you're into more of the hardcore superstar, Dreaming in the Casket, Beg for It, Split Your Lip era stuff, you may only find a few tracks to really get into on here. I'm going to give it a 60 out of 100. That is subject to change, which won't affect this review because it'll be posted, and I'm not going to re-edit or repost it again. Yeah, no, actually, that seems fair. 60 out of 100 is what I'm going to go with. Yeah. If you like the band, definitely check it out. It's got a few songs worth listening to, but I would listen to it before buying and see what you think of it beforehand. But for me, it's not what I wanted.